Well, hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar on how to supercharge your virtual team. I'm Corinne Jones from OD Consulting, and for those of you who haven't done my webinars before, for about the last 5 years or so, have specialised in maximising the productivity of virtual teams. So today I'm going to share with you my own experience in working with virtual teams, the experience of some of my clients, and I suppose some of the results of the ongoing research that I undertake into successful virtual teams. You'll note that in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there is a space for you to type messages. So please feel free to ask questions as we go. And I will either answer them at the time, or if it's not the best time, I'll come back to it a little bit later or at the very end of the presentation. I'm now going to share my screen so that you have the presentation up, and I'll see you back at the end of the webinar. So in today's webinar, I'm going to start by talking about the current reality for virtual teams. What are the challenges that teams are facing at the moment? Then some lessons from successful teams that you can use to supercharge your own team. So there are a couple of my consulting clients, a consulting team and a finance team. We're then going to look at TED's tech team, so the tech team behind those fabulous TED Talks, and some recent lessons from Yale University. And I'll then go through some ways that you can apply those lessons to supercharge your team. The current reality, apparently there are about 1.3 billion people globally working remotely, and that number is on a really steady increase at the moment. Of those teams though, 72% don't have team charters, so team members find that they're unable to connect their day-to-day activities to the goals of the team. In addition to that, leadership, whenever research is undertaken into virtual teams, leadership comes up as a big issue. And some other recent research identified that 19 out of 20 senior managers find it much harder to manage a remote or virtual team than they do a face-to-face team. So if you're finding it challenging, you're certainly not alone. 87% of virtual team members identified that a lack of face-to-face contact makes building trust and relationships at least somewhat challenging, and some of them, a large proportion, identified that it's very challenging. Effective collaboration is a significant issue for virtual teams. It's also been found that team members who don't participate in virtual team meetings become increasingly excluded and isolated from the team, and cultural challenges have been identified as the biggest hurdle for global virtual teams, particularly as the teams are becoming much more geographically dispersed. And this research all comes from RW3 Culture Wizard, who are a New York-based company who every 2 years do a global survey of virtual teams, and these are the 2016 results. So I'd be really interested to see what your challenges are as well. So please feel free to jot your challenges down in the chat box on the screen so that we can see what they are as we go. So now let's look at what we can do to learn from those who are doing it really well. I'm going to start with two of my consulting clients. So combined, I suppose the secrets that they've found work really well for them. First of all, they both have created a shared sense of purpose. So for both of them, it's one entire organisation and one team. They have a shared vision. They also have a team charter that guides the behaviour and norms and communication within the team, and they regularly revisit that. One particular team have in their regular team meetings have an opportunity for people they actually ask people to let the team know what they've been doing in the last month or so to align with the team charter. Set expectations really clearly right up front when the team first starts a particular project, and then on a regular basis every few months they come back to expectations. They replicate the elements of the normal office wherever they can by using photos of team members, newsletters, pictures of events that the team has done together, and they do replicate those watercooler conversations where so much of the rich incidental conversation happens in face-to-face teams. And I will give you some tips on how you can do that as you go through. They also use video conferencing as much as possible for their meetings, and they share their screens. They have a standing meeting, and that's a video meeting. It's very well organised up front so that it's nice and efficient. They keep it short, sharp, and very explicitly facilitated so that they're engaging their team members in the meeting, and they're using names as they go, and they both have some protocols around the way in which the meetings are managed. And they use email only when necessary, instead focusing on instant messaging to manage their incidental conversation. It's interesting, email is still one of the most used communication tools for virtual teams, but at the same time, it's seen as one of the major causes of communication breakdown. So if you're able to, for example, my own experience, I have my Skype messaging open throughout the day and use instant messaging throughout the day with my team members. And then if we do need to discuss anything a little bit more detailed, we arrange to jump on and have a video meeting either through Skype or Zoom. So they are two of my client teams. Let's look at Ted's tech team now. So the tech team has 29 members. They're split across 7 US states and 3 countries. And as we know, they're a very successful team. The presentations they bring us are amazing. The things that they do that they find work really well for them is they get together in person when possible. Now, I know it's not possible for all of your teams, but if you can, time together makes a huge difference in terms of building trust and relationships within the team, which means that then once team members have gone away, they'll be much more likely to reach out to collaborate and be much more open with their team members. They, again, set expectations really clearly on a regular basis, and that's mutual expectations. They, again, have a standing meeting, so I think they have a weekly video meeting. They review their tools on a regular basis. You're probably aware that there are constantly new tools coming onto the market. So they have a look at what they're using, they have a look at what else is available, and most importantly, they agree on which tools they're going to use for which communication purposes. They do invest in video conferencing as well so that they make sure they've got that face-to-face. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than just the words or the voices in a teleconference. They also replicate the elements of the normal office where they can, and they ensure everyone gets a hotspot. So that's really making sure that everybody is fully connected to their Wi-Fi, so they're online when they need to be, and they suggest get a room for everybody, which means a space that is free from interruptions, but also where they're not interrupting other colleagues, perhaps members of other teams or other people working in a hub. So they're the lessons from Ted's tech team. What I'd now like to do is to share with you some lessons from Yale. So Yale launched a virtual team leaders program in January this year, and what they've I suppose what I'm sharing with you now are the things that they have found from their research are working really well. And again, there's a common theme here: build a collective identity. So whether it's a team vision, team values, team charter, whatever it is that team members can use to connect themselves to the team as an entity, particularly if you've got people who are located in offices where they're working with members of other teams, or where they are reporting to you as a team leader but to somebody else on other projects. It's about making sure that people are connected into the team as an entity. Accept vulnerabilities. Trust is one of the big challenges for virtual teams, and we do need to be a little bit vulnerable to open ourselves up to, one, trust others, and to ask others to trust us. And so Yale have found that it's important that we accept that we do need to be a bit vulnerable in doing that. Avoid a focus on common knowledge, which is an interesting one because there's, my experience and my research has found that it's really important to build some common knowledge. But what Yale have found is that you don't want to do that so much that the diversity of experience and ideas and knowledge, etc., within the team is being diluted. So it's a little bit of a balance. Focus on the common elements where it's important, but then try not to focus too much where you want that diversity and difference of input. Because, one of the reasons that we often have a virtual team is so that we can bring onto the team a range of experience, and all of the differences add richness to the team. Don't make assumptions, really important, particularly when we have people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different areas of expertise. Important that we don't make assumptions, because that's often where the breakdowns in communication occur. And when a problem arises, evaluate communication first. When we're working remotely, and you probably find the same, that if something's gone haywire, it's often not about to do with the core work or the technical input or anything like that. Often it's because the communication hasn't been clear enough throughout the process. So they suggest look at communication first and then see what else might have caused the problem. So let's look at what you can do within your team to apply a number of these lessons to really supercharge your team. I'd be interested for you to let me know in the chat box if you are able to get together face-to-face, just so that I can find out what proportion of people on are able to do the face-to-face, because that's where I'm going to start. I would suggest that if you can do at least, once early in the life of the team, because it really does speed up the trust building process. It is still possible, very possible, to build trust, real trust, without face-to-face contact, but you will really ramp up that process if you can spend some time together, particularly if you use that time to develop shared vision, values, plans, where everybody's actively in co-creation of those artifacts. And include some social interaction. Can't understate the importance of having some social, informal discussion, whether it's morning teas, lunches, dinners, whatever it happens to be that suits your team, because that time together really, really useful in building bonds of trust, relationship within the team, and also, shared experiences, shared understanding, and some common ground. And you'll find that you can leverage that really quickly if you have the time together. But as I mentioned, if you don't, I suggest that you have your meetings via video and use some of that time for, some little icebreakers and team building activities, which I'll share with you a little bit later, to get that social interaction happening. And even have a check-in at the beginning of each one of your virtual meetings to get that social interaction happening. So that's the face-to-face. Whether you can get face-to-face or not, I would suggest that some form of shared vision is important. Now, most of you work within an organisation where there's an overall corporate vision, mission, business plans, etc. So you do have the framework there. This is about, what do you as a team aspire to? What are you working together to achieve? And I have just seen here that one of the people on the webinar is meeting for the first time at the end of the month, which is brilliant, and organising another catch-up meeting virtually once a month and twice a week currently due to a key event. That's fantastic. That's, if you can do that, both the face-to-face and the virtual meetings, brilliant. So, a process that involves everybody in developing a shared vision. Because it's one thing to have a vision, it's another to make sure that it's shared. So this is a process I've used with a range of different virtual teams. Most recently, I used it with a dispersed legal team, and started by asking team members 4 questions. What's the purpose of our team? What value do we add? What's unique about us? and how do we want to be perceived? So I ask everyone to answer those 4 questions and then ask them to identify, well, what are the key words out of that for you? And so everybody highlights or underlines some keywords. I give everybody a maximum of 6. And then we collate all of those keywords together. And say there are 20 people in a team, which is a very large team, but the one I worked with just recently was around about the 20. If everybody has 6 words, we certainly didn't end up with 120 words, because we found out pretty quickly through the process that there was a lot of commonality in terms of those keywords. So we then used those keywords to create a mind map, which helped the team to really organise and synthesise all of those keywords. Then the next step is to use that mind map to draft a vision statement, usually out of this process. And this process only takes about an hour. You'll get some form, a choice of a few drafts or one draft. I often ask the group to break up into smaller groups and come up with each with a draft. So there might be a range of them, but you'll find that there's usually a lot of overlap. And from that, someone usually volunteers to take that away, wordsmith it a little bit, circulate it for feedback. And what I have found is, because people have input into the process, they are much more motivated to work towards achieving that vision, because they understand what it means and they've got that buy-in. So quite a short process, but quite powerful in really increasing the engagement and motivation and focus of your team members. Because if they don't have that, as we found in the research, to focus on, team members can become pretty disconnected and therefore not working towards the outcomes for the team. So that's a shared vision. The other thing that I mentioned earlier that all of the high-performing virtual teams has is some form of team charter. I tend to use the term social contract. So a team designed, again, really important that it's designed by the team, agreement for an aspirational set of values, behaviours and social norms. So while the vision is more about work-wise, what we're looking to achieve as a team, the social contract or team charter is about how we're going to work together and communicate and collaborate to achieve that. And what often happens is that, you know, we all often have organisational values or team values where we come up with some really important words, such as leadership, responsibility, respect, teamwork, or creativity. But I would suggest that every single team member would have a very different interpretation of what each of those words means, particularly if people have come from different backgrounds, different countries, different cultures, different areas of expertise. So really important to involve everybody in identifying, well, what does that actually look like? And I've just thrown in a few examples here. Leadership might mean proactively reach out to connect with clients and customers. Responsibility might be say what you think, particularly if you have a different perspective. Respect might be to acknowledge electronic communication within agreed timeframes. Connect with other team members more regularly for teamwork, and creativity might be challenge the status quo by asking what-if questions. Now, these are just examples, and every team comes up with different behaviours, and that's really the importance of the process for the team themselves to identify what's important to us. How are we going to work together to really get stuff done and deliver on what it is that we need to deliver? To make the process work, yes, we need everybody's input, but I'd also suggest you get everybody's agreement to the content of the social contract or team charter, get everybody's commitment to actually calling behaviours when they sit outside these, and come back. As I mentioned, a finance team, a client team of mine, very regularly come back to their team charter and ask people, what have you been doing to operate within that? If you do, it can, again, be a way of binding your team members together and having everyone focusing on how are we going to work as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can. A lot of this comes back to trust as well. And I've found that trust is the make or break of a virtual team. What tends to happen in a virtual team is we develop swift trust. So it's similar to the trust that's built, say, in an emergency response team, where people are thrown together, often from all walks of life. They each have a role to do, and they each presume that, oh, well, that person's been given that role, they've had training, therefore I can trust them to do what they need to do. The problem with that is that it's a very fragile style of trust. So one broken promise, one failure to follow through, one miscommunication, and that trust is gone. So it's important for you to, yes, leverage that, but work past that cognitive trust, if you like, to really deep, enduring, what we call affective trust. And that is the trust that requires the development of relationships. It also requires some vulnerability on team members' parts. And a process that I found works really well for building this trust with individual team members is a little conversation around needs and expectations. Again, fairly simple little conversation. So we've all, just to give you a bit of background, we've all got needs and expectations, and we carry those into work with us every day. What we need and expect from our team leader, from our colleagues, from our work, from our workplace, from the organisation. If those needs and expectations aren't met, we become disillusioned, demotivated, and any trust is broken. But how often do we actually let people know what we need and expect from them? And how often do we ask our team members what they need and expect from us? Now, needs are probably more your foundation needs. If we go right back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, it would be, we need money to put food on the table and a roof out over our heads. We need security. We need a sense of belonging. Expectations can be much more individual. It might be that we expect that work will be fun. We expect to have some conversation with our manager every single day. We expect that we're going to get 6 weeks holiday every year. It can really, really vary. And in terms of the difference between needs and expectations, it probably doesn't matter if we're trying to work out, is that a need or an expectation? It's more important to find out, what is it that our team members need and expect from us, and what do we need and expect from them. So the simple conversation starts with you asking each of your individual team members, or I've actually done this on a sub-team basis as well, what do they need and expect from you? You might need to negotiate depending on what some of those expectations are, and then you let them know what you need and expect from them. And again, it gives you that basis for strong relationships, trust, engagement, motivation. And I found that it works really well, particularly if you do it on a regular basis, in terms of keeping people on track and making sure that people are, you're providing and they're receiving what they need and expect from you and the team. And so trust is maintained, motivation, and therefore engagement and performance is maintained as well. So that's something that you can do to engage and supercharge your individual team members. For the team as a whole, I'm going to show you a few little creative exercises that you can do at the beginning of your virtual team meetings to really boost the trust and therefore the engagement of your team members. Now, these couple are based on some research around the links between creativity, trust, engagement, and performance. And what's been found is that creativity can build trust within the team, which then goes on to building engagement. A couple of fun little processes. So the first one is a caricature match game. So what you'll do is you get all of your team members to create a caricature of themselves. You pop those all into one document or a shared space. And at a team meeting, you ask team members to see if they can guess who is who. Another variation on this one is to use baby photos if you prefer to do that. Another one, if people don't feel as though they're quite so artistic, it might be, well, there's a few variations on this one. It might be that people produce a picture, something from the internet or something from their lives that they feel really reflects who they are and what they bring to the team, and ask other people to guess who belongs to which image, or it might be that you ask people to bring an image that describes them, their strengths and what they bring to the team, and to use that as an opportunity for people to open up a little bit about who they are, what their strengths are, and what they do bring to the team. And then the third one is to use avatars to do something very similar to that. Ask people to create an avatar that represents them, their strengths, and their contribution to the team. This particular process was used by a team I worked with a few years ago, a team of archaeologists, anthropologists who were quite widely dispersed. What they did, and they did this when they came together, was to create, they got a map and they each created an avatar, and they went through the process of attaching their avatar to their place on the map. As they did that, they told the team members a little bit about their location, their role, their background, and what all of that means to them. And they found that ritual in itself was really powerful in them, one, understanding who are the people in the team and what are the strengths do they bring to the team, but two, in creating a shared entity, or what they referred to as a sense of family. Now, I'm not sure that that would be language that would work for all of your teams, but for them, it was what worked for them. And then they took an electronic image of that, and so they all have a symbol of that ritual at their workplaces, which then creates that line of sight back from an individual working perhaps alone to the team that they belong to and the team that they're working for. So a couple of little quick processes. Another process that I often uses the Prelude Suite. This one actually starts with people undertaking a self-analysis, which identifies, creates an I star, as we call it, which identifies the strengths that people bring to the team based on their work preferences. They then, just very simply using PowerPoint, create a visual representation of that. So using 3 words, 3 images or symbols and 3 colours, they create a PowerPoint slide that represents their strength. They then combine each of their individual I tags into a we tag for sub teams or an all tag for the whole team, which then provides a really powerful collage of the strengths that are brought to the team. And this particular process, it aligns with a team alignment plan as well, but we've found that it really speeds up the team development process. It's like tuning up, like an orchestra tunes up before it performs, getting from forming right through performing in a really quick space of time without being derailed by the storming phase of team development. If you're aware of Tuckman's stages of team development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. So it's skipping a couple of steps and going right to where the team needs to be. If you'd like to know a little bit more about that or anything else that I'm talking about in the webinar, stay on to the end or jot a comment into the chat box, and I'm more than happy to give you some more information there. I mentioned with the high-performing virtual teams earlier that a lot of them look to replicate the face-to-face office as much as possible. And one of the things that those teams do is that not only do they meet with video, but they also use their virtual meetings for celebrations. So it might be morning teas, it might be lunches. As you're probably aware, the opportunity to celebrate success is a great way of really building momentum within the team's performance. And so if you're able to do that, that's a really nice way of supercharging the team as well. I mentioned all of these teams have virtual meetings. So this is just a very simple Skype meeting. I know that some of you on the line have Skype for Business. Some of you have Skype. We're all on Zoom today, and I find Zoom is a really nice, you can use it for free, nice platform to use as well. And I'll come back to it in a moment, but I do suggest that if you can, that you use video, because the richness of the communication and therefore the speed of the communication is much better if you've got your video as well as your voice and your text. The high-performing teams also replicate watercooler conversations. And the reason that I have this here is that a team manager that I worked with a couple of years ago has virtual coffee meetings with his remote team members. They each head down to their coffee shop, grab their coffee, sit down and have a chat via phone. And while they find it a little bit strange at first, they do find that the informal setting really helps to generate those water cooler type conversations, which is where we do build relationships, but it's often where creativity and spontaneous ideas come from as well. If the coffee idea doesn't work for you, you can always use your instant messaging, your social media, or even just pick up the phone and have some purely social conversations. I'm going to spend some time now looking at communication tools and how you can use your communication to really supercharge, ramp up the performance of your team. So some research undertaken last year around the tools that teams are using. So 84% of remote teams are using instant messaging every day. And I find that that works well, and that interaction is really important in terms of dealing with things as they come up, keeping the relationships going. 51% use daily phone calls. Really be happy for you to pop in comments about what you tend to use. 70% use project management software. And some of that's really simple. For example, I find Trello, which is a free tool, really simple to use and works really well for project management. 76 use team collaboration software, and when visual non-verbal communication is important. So I would suggest that's whenever it's a sensitive conversation, whenever it's something around feedback or something relevant to that, whenever it's a complex conversation, I'd go for the video. So 50% of respondents use screen sharing regularly. Only 8 say that they rarely use screen sharing, which is really good, and no teams don't use it at all. 39% use video calls regularly, and 16% say that they rarely or never use video. And really, overall, the most used tools are instant messaging and screen sharing. I'm finding that there is a little bit of a slow uptake on video, and I have a bit of a concern about that for this reason. If you're using conference calls or teleconferences for your regular team meetings, as you can see from this slide, people could be doing a whole range of other things other than being engaged in the meeting. And some of those are really quite concerning in terms of, please excuse me, exercising, online shopping, playing video games when they should actually be on the meeting. So if you're able to use video and really engage people in the process, you'll find that your meetings are more efficient and effective, and your team members are more engaged. Because I also mentioned earlier that there's some research that suggests that if your team members aren't engaged in regular meetings, they are likely to become excluded or isolated from the team. So if you look at your tools, think about the richness. Purely text is quite low in richness and probably just best for sharing information. Those that are moderate in richness, so your teleconferences, telephone, but also your document sharing, your instant messaging, they're useful for a wide range of conversations, particularly where you're looking to get input from people and wanting decisions made in real time. But as I mentioned earlier, if it's complex or if it's sensitive, if it's anything like feedback or tension, conflict, anything like that, I suggest you go for the video conference at a minimum, if not the face-to-face, because it's very hard to deal with those things when you can't actually read the person's body language. So that concludes the content for today's webinar. Going back over the tips from successful virtual teams, think about how you might be able to put some of these in place within your team to really supercharge its performance. So get together in person when possible. Create clear goals, shared sense of purpose, build a collective identity. Develop a team charter, and then importantly, regularly revisit it. Ask your team members, what are they doing to work within the charter? Set expectations, and that's mutual. Find out theirs and set yours. Replicate the elements of the normal office with photos, newsletters, pictures, watercooler conversations, and I'd also suggest video meetings and celebrations when you can. Invest in video conferencing, share your screens. And when I say invest, that's really in inverted commas, because there are a number of tools out there now that are very low cost or free to use. Have a standing meeting. Make sure it's really well organised so that it's very efficient, short and sharp, explicitly facilitated. And use email only when necessary. Instead, try to focus on using instant messaging to manage your incidental conversation, because that way you will avoid the breakdowns in communication, but also the lag that it takes for, an email trail to go back and forth for several hours or several days. If you just either get on the phone or use your instant messaging, you can get a result straight away. And for those of you who are on the webinar today, I've got a special offer of a free 1 hour one-on-one consultation and team development strategy. So either if there are challenges within your team that you're looking for some ideas to overcome, or if there's anything in today's webinar that you've thought you'd like to know a little bit more about, please feel free to email us at admin@odconsulting.com.au. And if you would like to get in touch, there is more information on our website, www.odconsulting.com.au, and please feel free to connect with me, whether it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I often send out research, case studies, tips and tools via all of those social media platforms. What I would like to do now, though, is to find out what questions you have, any comments, questions, and we can take a moment to cover those off now. I do have a question here about what is the difference between having conversations. Why is it that email, I suppose, is such a problem, I think is what's coming through on this one. And it does come back down to the elements of communication. If we think about, I'm not sure if you know about studies undertaken by Albert Morabian, probably about 40 years ago, that look at how we communicate face to face. It's identified that the largest proportion of the communication actually happens through nonverbals. That's 55% of the communication process. 38% of the process is through our tone of voice, and then only 7% is through the words. And so if we are communicating just using the words, we're actually missing a whole lot of the context. And often what happens is that when we can't get the full context, we tend to make things up, and depending on the experience we've had with that person, it may not be the best. So I suppose always my reasoning for going for at least the telephone, and if you can, the video. I've got another one here. Do you have examples of team charters, social contracts that you could share or talk through? I do have some examples. What I could do, I actually have 2 examples that come to mind at the moment. What I could do is, I don't have it right in my hand, so I would have to move across the office to grab one, but I would be able to circulate it to anybody who either wants to pop their details down in the chat box now, or if you would like to email me at admin@odconsulting.com.au, I can send them out to anybody who's interested. So I do have a couple that you might find useful. One team went down to a lot of detail, right down to meeting protocols and things like that. The other is the other team. It's similar sort of headings to, it was what I based the ones on the screen on, but they've come up with a number of behaviours under each one of those. So no other questions. So thank you very much for getting online with me today. I hope you have found it useful. It has been a pleasure, and I am recording this, so please let me know if you would like a copy of the recording. Good luck with supercharging your virtual teams, and I look forward to seeing you on the... I might just check. It looks as though we've got another question popping up. No, we've already covered that off. So good luck with your team, and I look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thank you, everybody. Bye.